GameStop bought 4,710 Bitcoin, and somehow this still disappointed the market. What's up, apes? My name is Forrest Hodel. I'm a Bitcoin coach and educator, and if you want to book a one-on-one to look after your Bitcoin security needs and Bitcoin basics, you can do so in the link in the description. So on the 28th of May at the Bitcoin conference, there was a recorded call between the CEO of BTC Inc., David Bailey, and the CEO of GameStop, Ryan Cohen. And we actually don't know when this was recorded, but in the recording, the CEO of GameStop, Ryan Cohen, announced that they bought 4,710 Bitcoin. You can also see they did a news release here as well discussing that and not really saying much other information except that they bought that Bitcoin, not what price and not at what day, not a lot of information. We're going to actually take a look at the interview that they did and discuss some of the points and talk about the market's reaction to it and where I think GameStop is going in the future.
But the company today is profitable in the US, and we've gotten our costs under control. You had a lot of executives and directors that were very short-sighted, and effectively they were making decisions that were what they call in corporate America in good corporate governance, which is effectively screwing shareholders. So we got rid of all of that nonsense and we focused on running the business profitably.
So the first few minutes of this interview, not really getting into much, talking more about GameStop, of course, that is his expertise. I kind of find it ironic that he talks about not screwing over the shareholders when they did massive share dilution, which arguably saved their company and allowed them to have the cash reserves to earn interest on that to become profitable again. I would say he's actually doing a decent job as a CEO. He's cutting costs and increasing profitability. And this Bitcoin strategy is the next step, in my opinion, to reviving GameStop. But the first couple of minutes of this interview, it's all off sync for some reason during the live stream that I'm watching it from. And he just talks over and over about cutting costs and becoming profitable.
Also made some news about, a month ago or so, that you raised some money that you might use to buy Bitcoin. I guess the $1 million question that everyone wants to know is, has GameStop bought Bitcoin?
We have bought Bitcoin.
Okay, how much?
We currently own 4,710 Bitcoins.
Let's go. So tell us about that. Why did GameStop decide to buy Bitcoin?
It was, if the thesis is correct, then Bitcoin and gold as well can be a hedge against global currency devaluation and systemic risk. Bitcoin has certain unique advantages compared to gold. The portability aspect of it, it's instantly transferable across the globe, whereas gold is bulky and very expensive to ship. The authenticity, it's instantly verified via the blockchain. The storage, you can easily secure Bitcoin in a wallet, whereas gold requires insurance and it's very expensive. There's the scarcity element of it as well. There's a fixed supply of Bitcoin, whereas with gold, certain technological advances, the supply of gold is still uncertain. And then ultimately, there's the asymmetric upside. Gold is a more mature market. It's sort of roughly around 20 trillion of market capitalization, whereas Bitcoin today is about 2 trillion. And if the thesis is correct, then ultimately Bitcoin becomes digital gold, adopted, then there's more upside. But we'll see what happens. Nobody has a crystal ball, but that's the current thesis.
Now, what I find interesting about here is Ryan does understand Bitcoin to some degree. You know, he talks about it in relation to gold. And I think the reason that he does that is because he's a public company with a large war chest of capital. They have a huge amount of dollars on their balance sheet. And I think most of that is just in treasuries, but so you're kind of looking for other options that could outperform those treasuries, right? You can't, as a company, individually start picking stocks without changing what type of company you are. So it makes it very difficult to invest in securities. Michael Saylor has talked about this a lot. So in that, you start looking at what can you invest in as a company, or what can you hold on your balance sheet to improve your company standing over time. And one of the things that you can hold is commodities. So you look into something like gold, right? You look into Bitcoin, and you start comparing those two things, because those two are really the main thing that companies could consider beyond treasuries. Those are the two things that would make sense. It wouldn't make sense to start buying other commodities, corn or oil or something like that. It doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't make sense to buy any other cryptocurrencies, as they're completely centralized and they don't have the liquidity of Bitcoin and so many other things as well. So I like this part of the interview because, he's coming at it from that lens, but it's clear that he's done his homework, or that he's been educated. He understands Bitcoin at this level. This conversation doesn't go much deeper about, does he understand proof of work or supply issuance or difficulty adjustment? How much does he understand beyond the comparison of Bitcoin and gold? I'm not sure, but it is pretty promising that he has done his homework at least this far.
Well, congratulations. And I feel like GameStop is the ultimate meme stock and Bitcoin is the ultimate meme money. And if you combine the two, you get a meme super cycle. So, what's next for GameStop?
David raises a very interesting point here. The fact that GameStop is such a meme stock allows it to have incredible volatility and retail interest, which creates different pricing dynamics because there's different types of buyers. So this was part of my thesis as well. I was a GameStop shareholder. I got out of the position because I felt like the transparency wasn't there, and I preferred to invest in things that were more transparent, which I'll get into a lot more at the end, because there's more things that Ryan says that really illustrate that point. However, when I was a shareholder, part of my thesis was this stock, GameStop, is already incredibly volatile, and it has these short runs of volatility. So my idea was to harness that volatility and sell out of the money covered calls against it. And I actually did fairly well with that. Never got in the money, was able to harvest sort of that premium. And the idea I had was, if they really did implement the strategy playbook and harness that volatility and really, created products like convertible bonds or something like that, which actually they did do. Again, we'll go into this deeper. But part of my thesis was the combination of Bitcoin's volatility and GameStop's already having a high implied volatility could lead them to an outperformance and an ability to acquire a lot of Bitcoin by issuing things like convertible bonds.
Are you going to buy more Bitcoin? Is this the next MicroStrategy, the next MetaPlanet, or even better?
We're not going to call our shots in advance for obvious reasons, but GameStop is following GameStop's strategy. We're not following anyone else's strategy.
Okay.
So this really points again to the lack of transparency. And I think it is not an obvious reason. I think Ryan Cohen says, for obvious reasons, we're not going to call our shots. That's the way he puts it. I think actually it's less obvious. It wasn't obvious to me on a first listen. I had to kind of think about, why is he not being transparent? What I recognized and realized is that GameStop has a history of being one of the most manipulated stocks on the stock market, having huge short interest, over amount of shorts compared to the actual outstanding shares. I think what GameStop has going for it right now is its uncertainty, which creates, again, that volatility. If you don't know what they're going to do, it makes it very dangerous to short it, and there allows a lot of liquidation events for shorts when they do something that's unpredictable. So I think that is part of the reason that they're not calling the shots. They're not being as transparent as, say, MetaPlanet or Strategy, that announces, say with Strategy, announces every week how much they bought it for, all of this information. Whereas with GameStop, we don't know even how much they paid for these, right? And I'm going to get into some math near the end of this video. But if they ended up buying it for a fairly low price, again, unsure of what that would be, the market doesn't know either, and that goes on to their earnings because of fair value accounting of Bitcoin, that could really surprise to the upside for their earnings per share and their revenue and whatnot. And that could obliterate some shorts or just have this crazy outperformance in the short term. So I think that there is good reason for them to do what they're doing by not calling their shots, by doing the GameStop strategy as opposed to following anybody else's strategy. But again, this kind of unpredictability isn't my type of investment, hence why I've liquidated my position and actually moved into Metaplanet predominantly. I did buy some CEP as well. So those were my two position changes after owning GameStop and selling calls against it.
What is the message you'd like to send the global Bitcoin community and everyone who's watching this interview right now?
No pressure. No pressure. Don't follow GameStop. Make your own decisions independently. It's my message. Just do whatever you're comfortable with.
Don't trust, verify. Let's go.
Exactly.
Well, Ryan, thank you for hopping on. Congratulations on your big.
That last comment there, it seems like they're kind of talking past each other. There wasn't any real conformity to that. It wasn't very meaningful in my eyes, and actually kind of was a low T moment for Ryan Cohen, in my opinion, and really left any sort of confidence. This, again, a lot of investing in companies is you're investing in the CEO. They're kind of the one leading the charge. They're the figurehead, and a lot of big sort of decisions with the company is obviously going through the CEO, and they're public facing and have to present a certain way. I think again, sort of just the presentation of that last comment, it just didn't instill a lot of confidence in the Bitcoin community that was rallying around GameStop. And I saw, again, many other people like me leave this position after this interview, even though he showed competence with his knowledge of Bitcoin. But because of the unpredictability, and again, because of just sort of the vagueness, I think a lot of people are just moving on to something a little bit more concrete with their, leveraged Bitcoin equities and such. And again, we don't see a strategy of GameStop acquiring Bitcoin with leverage or even putting all of their treasury into it or anything close to that. So I think that as well was another reason that people for the Bitcoin play of GameStop left this trade.
Bitcoin buy to many more. Let's go. Thank you.
YOLO.
YOLO.
And Ryan ends it with YOLO, the very in phrase, in 2025, definitely not from 2011, 2012, when people used to say YOLO. Overall, a very strange interview, very interesting interview. There's a lot left unsaid. There's a lot to be seen, and there's earnings coming up for GameStop. Now, I did want to talk about these numbers again. When I got into this position and reading up on information, I think I was convinced that the GameStop would have to release an 8K after buying Bitcoin. And that is true if it was above a certain threshold. If it was a really significant amount, they would have to do that. Now, they didn't do that. They just announced this as sort of a news event. And it's because of the position size compared to their treasury holdings. It is insignificant, or not insignificant, but it's very little. And therefore they didn't have to file an 8K, and they could have this information sort of in retainer and released it for, on the conference day and sort of make a little hoopla about it, get some interest, hopefully. And it turns out that basically that backfired. And I think a large part of it was actually the performance of the CEO and maybe the Bitcoin as well, the purchase amount and things like that. Now, what we could see here is earnings coming up with GameStop. They could announce a lot more. They would have to be very transparent, right? They're a public company. All of this needs to be audited and all that. And they could show a lot more information about the Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which will come soon. I'm actually going to take a look here. Their earnings are coming up on June 10th. So very, very soon we'll see if they bought more, if they just announced this, if they bought more beyond that, and after that, when they bought this, what their purchasing price was. This will go in onto their earnings because of FASB's fair value accounting for digital assets. And there's a lot left to be seen. Now, if we look at GameStop's chart on the 28th, they cratered. They went from a high of 35.85 in one day down to a low of basically, let's call it 31.16. They went down around 12% in one day after announcing their Bitcoin buy. So the market did not like this. This was either people exiting the position based on the factors I talked about, or potentially short interest, shorting the Bitcoin acquisition and sort of shorting the Bitcoin strategy and saying, oh, this isn't going to work. I'm going to short against this. And we've seen a retracement back to, they had sort of like a little bit of a bubble leading into this, or a little bit of a hype push, right? Gap even, a lot of, big green candles, and then just a big, fully engulfing red candle. So, we're back at some levels that are a little bit more sort of making sense for this sort of price action and recent action with GameStop. We could see lower, we could see higher, we could see a bounce after this, but it's definitely had a bit of a cool off after these few days of rising here. They did on the 27th, they did do a convertible bond, and likely the convertible bond was bought by arb traders, and hence the shorting that happened here because they wanted to become delta neutral. So after that happened, we went all the way down to basically $20, and we're still up really quite significantly after that on GameStop. So GameStop's doing fine. They're doing just fine. Now, it is very interesting to me that they issued $1.3 billion of convertible bonds. So they took that in as cash. And they also have, I think, $4.7 billion of cash beyond that as well. If Bitcoin was at an average price of $100,000, which it easily could have been, they could have bought it down within, they could have bought it at 74, 80, 110. They could buy it at all sorts of different prices after their announcement. And they do have 4,710 Bitcoin, which seems like a lot, but that is $471 million at $100,000 per Bitcoin. And again, they issued 1.3 billion in convertible bonds. They didn't even put all of the money that they got from those convertible bonds into Bitcoin yet, or at all. And they again have that other 4+ billion on their balance sheet. So they have a lot more capital to deploy. And it is a little bit disappointing that this purchase or this news release was at such a low amount. Now, even though this is relatively small amount compared to their treasury, they still could see a pretty big price appreciation if they did buy this in the low sort of period, and they get the snapshot at the high for their earnings. And I guess we will just have to wait and see. We don't have the information. Again, this is part of why I am not a long-term investor in GameStop, and why I sold my position and moved into other things, was I don't care about GameStop, the business. I care about Bitcoin. I want to hold Bitcoin. I want to own Bitcoin. And if I hold any sort of equity, I want them to be fully allocated to Bitcoin. I want them to have an operating business that acquires Bitcoin, or use the financial markets to acquire more Bitcoin per share. That is the metric that I care about. I don't care about, the storefronts, the collectibles, the infrastructure, profitable business, this kind of stuff. If they're stacking cash, I don't care about it. So that's why I think I'm not alone there. I think other people feel the same way. We will have to see. It is really still a big thing that they did end up buying this amount of Bitcoin. And I just hope that they continue going down this road, because I think it will be very, very successful for them if they continue to buy Bitcoin. Would love to hear your thoughts. I know the apes out there are very opinionated and will probably hate on me for some of the what they assume will be negative, commentary about their Lord and Savior, Ryan Cohen. In my opinion, I think there's a little good here, a little bad. To me, it's not investable at this moment. I might miss out on some gains. I already have, the shares are still trading $2 higher than I sold them at, and I was up 30% on them, so I'm fine, plus all of the, covered calls I did on them. So I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm fine with losing out on it. I think, I hope the apes, regardless of the type of behavior the community has towards other investors, I still hope they perform well. I hope GameStop does well. And I hope that right now, again, they own 4,710 of the new base layer money, the 21 million cap that will not get increased. They own a piece of that. They own a large, significant piece of that. And, congratulations to them and congratulations to their shareholders. I know the news wasn't received that well by market price and all of that, but I think that it was a fantastic choice, better than buying doing a merger and acquisition or anything like that. I think Bitcoin was the right choice. I just think that maybe the posturing and the position was not large enough or confident enough and clear enough. So that would be my criticism. And if you guys want to get yourself some Bitcoin, I recommend checking out Bitcoin Well. They're a non-custodial exchange, which means that when you send them dollars, they send you Bitcoin directly, so you don't open yourself up to counterparty risk. If you want to book a one-on-one with me for any of your Bitcoin needs, you can do so in the link in the description. And if you want to get yourself a hardware wallet, I recommend the BlockStream Jade. There's an affiliate link in the description as well. It goes to support this show and costs you nothing extra. And if you need to preserve your seed phrase for future generations, check out the Stampseed kit and get 15% off using my code BTC, not crypto, 15. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bitcoin, not crypto.